Hello my friends, and welcome back to Radical Radio Scotland. It's me, Hasby, gently offering you once again the words of another fantastic human being. So yeah, prepare your little ear holes because today I am blessed to share with you a conversation that I had with another good friend of mine, Amy Stevenson. And what a chat it was. We had a great chat ranging from veganism to colonialism and of course charities co-opting social movements. But before we delve into this wonderful chat that I had with Amy, just a bit of podcast news. We actually now have a Patreon, so if you want to support this podcast in any way, then I'm sure you'll be able to find a link attached to our channel, our podcast. I don't even know. It'll be there. You'll find it. But anyway, enough about the podcast. Let's hear from Amy Stevenson herself. Everybody, please put your hands together for Amy Stevenson. So yeah, why not start with the biggest thing in your life, which is veganism? Am I right in saying that you've been vegan for 9 years this year?
9 years. Yes, 9 years. Yep, 9 years this January. So it's been my vegan anniversary at some point this month.
That's wild. That's wild. Yeah, like I worked it out because I met you in 2018 and you'd been vegan for 5 years then.
Yeah.
That's mad. Yeah. So yeah, what initially sparked your interest in veganism?
So when I turned 13, my sister told me that if I didn't go vegetarian, that she wouldn't love me anymore.
Okay.
Quite a lot of pressure.
Wow.
13-year-old. So initially, that's probably what sparked the initial interest. Like, okay, I should probably look into this. Don't want to lose my sister's love. But yeah, like I had initially tried to go vegetarian when I was that age, like 13, and then it obviously failed because I was doing it for the wrong reasons. But then when I was, I think, 14, I went vegetarian. I'd always like lived in the middle of nowhere, been surrounded by like farmed animals. And I think it just took a while for the penny to drop about like the reality of what was happening to those animals. So once that happened, I went vegetarian and then started looking into the industries a bit more, discovered how awful the dairy industry is, the egg industry, both for the animals and for the planet, and also for health, but mainly my motivation was trying to be vegan for the animals first.
Yeah, that's cool. So how does your veganism tie in with your political beliefs?
I would say they're completely intertwined. I think when I went vegan, I was 15, and prior to that I'd been pretty ignorant about a lot of political issues and not really questioned a lot of just what was going on around me. And I think after I went vegan, it was like a wake-up call to be like, okay, all these things that you've been told are normal and okay and just the way things are, a lot of them are actually pretty harmful and destructive and need to be challenged. And so for me, it was like going vegan was a big wake-up call in general. And then I started looking into learning about feminism and then capitalism. And that was why I then decided to study politics and economics and then human rights. I was like, I just want to learn as much as I can about all of this, about like what is going on, how have I, I mean, 15 is quite young to be like, how have I got to this age? And never known this because you're 15. But it kind of felt like that, and it felt like there's just so much that I don't understand about how the world works. And and I think veganism is kind of like an effort to minimize violence and harm, and I think that's also quite a political idea, because I think a lot of our society is geared around violence in one way or another. And it's also recognizing that there's power over dynamics between different groups. And for veganism, obviously that's between species. And then you realize it's everywhere. It's men over women, and it's, the dominant group over the minority groups, and it's just everywhere. So I think it was one of those that it was like the sort of the penny dropped and then everything else came afterwards.
Yeah. So it was veganism that initially got you interested in politics?
Yeah. I would say so. Yeah, I think so. It was kind of like a strange way to come to politics, really, but that's why I think it is so important to me. Like you said, it's
Yeah,
the most important thing in my life in a lot of ways because it's where my interest and everything else came from as well.
yeah, kind of represents that doorway into everything that you're interested in now.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's like for me, it was sort of like motivated by compassion. So if you're recognizing that you're trying to stop innocent little lambs being slaughtered or whatever just by making a personal choice, it's also recognizing your own responsibility, I think, and your own role in perpetuating harm as well. And I think that's why then everything else sort of clicked into place, because I think in some ways, like, species over species power dynamics, that's the more radical one in our society, I would say, to acknowledge that and to say that you think that's wrong. Um, and yeah, so I think everything else sort of came after that quite easily.
Yeah, that's interesting that it came that way. Like, for me, it was the opposite. I was interested in politics. Like, I was already learning about those power dynamics within society. Within, I get that. Like, at that point, I was already identifying like as an anarchist and just believing that all hierarchy should be dismantled if it can't justify itself, all these different power dynamics. I think for me as well, it was kind of twofold. So I had that whole kind of the power dynamic aspect, but I was also involved in Don't Frack the Briggs, like an environmental campaign. And just when I was learning about the kind of environmental impacts of veganism, it's kind of like, oh well, with all of these things considered, I don't really have a choice. If I want to be consistent on my anti-hierarchy beliefs and kind of dismantling these systems where there's power dynamics that are exploited constantly, then veganism is just another token of that. It's just another part of it.
Yeah, it just makes sense.
Yeah, I do get what you mean. It's like, it's one of the more radical ones. I feel like it's been extremely depoliticized.
Yes.
Over recent years. It's kind of been like, the more it's thrust into the mainstream, it's not as much of a movement and a protest as it used to be. It's kind of presented as like a lifestyle choice.
It is, exactly. It's quite disappointing, I think, to see. Sorry, you can hear the dog shaking there. But I think it's quite disappointing. Like it's good in one way because, like, as more people go vegan, you're like, oh, okay, that must be having an impact. But as you say, when you depoliticize it, when you de-radicalize it, it just takes away the sort of the potential power that has to fundamentally challenge the regimes that are in place and to be part of that bigger movement of change. It's just like, oh, just go to McDonald's for your McPlant burger, and that's it. And it's like, yeah, it's a double-edged sword, I think, it all going, it becoming so popular.
Yeah. So in 2018, you spent the summer living the vegan dream in a wee farm sanctuary in the US. Could you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah. So first of all, I'd say a wee farm sanctuary, but it's got over like 900 animals now. It's massive. Yeah, and it's like over 300 acres. So it's like really.
Okay, it's not wee.
It's not wee, no. It started out very wee. It started out just people. The founder just sort of like picked a sheep off the dead pile at a. Oh goodness, that's terrible. What's it called? It wasn't the slaughterhouse. It was the auction. What's it called, Harry?
An auction?
It's not. It's like where they auction off the animals. I know this. I've been to them multiple times. Oh gosh, give me a minute and please edit this out for me.
Okay. Promises.
No, please. Stockyard. There we go.
Stockyard.
Okay. Stockyard. Yeah. Sorry. So they picked off Hilda off a dead pile at the stockyard. They realised that she was still breathing and alive, and that she'd been discarded. And they took her home and they had her in their back garden, and then they realised like the kids who lived next door would like ask a lot of questions about her and want to know more. And it was this sort of like curiosity from the children nearby that made them realize this is actually part of something bigger. This has the potential to really like educate people and engage people with animal rights in a way that hasn't really been done before. It was the first farm sanctuary in the US at the time.
Oh wow.
Yeah, so then they purchased some land, and it's just expanded since there. And it's amazing. It's my little like safe place, I would say, to go there. It is literally like a vegan bubble. We're all, because as I said, I grew up around farmed animals, and for me it was really hard to come to the realization of what their fates were going to be and how shortened their lives were going to be. And so you go to farm sanctuary and you just get to see all these animals living their best lives, and they've came from like the most horrific situations a lot of the time. You know, they've endured so much abuse, so much harm, so much violence, and yet they're just the most forgiving and compassionate people you'll ever meet. And it's a whole environment. Like there's like, I'm sure we'll get on to talk about the limitations of, you know, the kind of big charity, big bureaucratic organizational parts of it, but in its essence, it's amazing because you get to connect with these people who you call the animals people, which is great, which I wasn't used to that, but they're persons, they're individuals, they're recognized and loved for who they are, and it's the best experience. I mean, I was there, I was really lucky. I got to give public tours for the whole summer. I was there in 2018 and then again in 2019. And yeah, I got to deliver tours to the public, where again, it's such a great experience to get to chat to people and educate them and share these animal stories and see them connect with the animals and sort of hear what you're talking about in terms of the industrial abuse that goes on, and then also connect with these individuals and see the real impact that it's had. And see, I think most importantly, that there's another way, that there's an alternative to this abuse, and it doesn't need to be the reality. And I could just talk about farm sanctuary all day. But yeah, it is the best place. And if anyone gets a chance to visit a sanctuary, they should absolutely do it. There's some that are being set up in Scotland right now. Tribe is a great one to visit. You can stay overnight in a really sweet wee hut.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's really, oh, you should do it, Harry. It's amazing.
I think I sponsored a pig at Tribe Sanctuary for my friend who loves pigs.
That's such a good gift, by the way. That's amazing.
I'm sure it was with them.
It probably was. Yeah, it probably was, because they have quite a few pigs, and there's one that lives in the house with them as well. I think his name's Francisco. But yeah, it's really nice. You should definitely, if you get a chance, go and stay. And there's like pigs right outside your door, and there's a wee rescue dog that just runs around and comes in the hut and stuff. It's great. Yeah. So there's sanctuaries here. At the time when I was applying for the internship, that was pretty much the only opportunity there was for that sort of thing. So yeah, I was really lucky to get to go and have that experience.
So when was it set up? You're saying it was the first one in the US?
Farm Sanctuary was founded in 1986, I think. I'm pretty sure. That's terrible. I used to say this every single day, 3 times a day in the tour. But yeah, it was 1986.
I mean, that does seem consistent with when there was a lot, like, I feel like I've met a few vegans that started in the 80s. So that does seem consistent with, like, sometimes you just meet a vegan and they're like, yeah, I've been vegan 30 years. You're like, what?
You're like, how?
Yeah.
How? Like, I know, like when I went, it was still like, it was quite a healthy choice because there were none of the alternatives that are there now. It was hard to be an unhealthy vegan. You pretty much just had to live off of chips and nothing else.
Oreos.
Oreos. Yeah, that's true. Oreos. That was some discovery that day.
Yeah. I can't even think of the difference that you've seen in 9 years, because I think this is 2022. I think 6 years this year for me. And even the difference in that time period is nuts.
It is. And I think it's also the awareness of it. I think it's the fact that when I went vegan, I was at school and no one had a clue what it was. Everyone thought I was, doing something completely outlandish by being vegan. And they were always like, oh, can you eat this? Can you eat that? Can you eat this? Can you eat that? Whereas now I feel like, thankfully, you don't get those questions quite as much.
Yeah.
There's still, not everyone knows what it is, and that's fine. But yeah, you just realize the awareness of it is definitely risen as well.
Yeah. So obviously we both have kind of decolonial attitudes. Well, I'm assuming that you do. We haven't
Yes,
really had
I do.
a proper conversation about that. But yeah, I always try to observe the US through like an Indigenous perspective and always kind of apply that lens, because that was originally their land. They are the original custodians of the land. Was there like any acknowledgement about that at the sanctuary? I can't remember its name.
It's just Farm Sanctuary.
Just Farm Sanctuary, yeah.
Farm Sanctuary, yep, the original.
Pretty standard.
It is. I know, I think they got in early with the name. But yeah, so unfortunately, as you say, like it is on stolen land. Like it's this little haven for all the vegans, but it is on stolen land, and there's not much acknowledgement of that at the sanctuary itself. The only time I ever heard it mentioned and the territory, the original name of the territory acknowledged, was in a talk by Carol Adams. I don't know if you've read her book.
I don't think so.
No, so she wrote The Sexual Politics of Meat. It's a great book. She also wrote, I think it's Neither Man Nor Beast. And it's all sort of like pulling out the relationship between feminism and veganism. And like we're talking about sort of the power dynamics that are similar. And yeah, she was a speaker at the Sanctuary Weekend, which is sort of like an annual conference at Farm Sanctuary, sorry. And they have like 250 guests who pay an extortionate amount of money, I have to say, to visit for the weekend and camp on the grounds and, get a lot of time with the animals, which you otherwise wouldn't get, and get to hear from all these amazing speakers as well. And Carol Adams was probably the most radical speaker that they had in the 2 summers that I was there and got to hear all these talks. And that was how she started out her presentation, was saying, I'm going to acknowledge that we are on stolen territory, stolen land right now. And I would say a lot of what she was talking about, it was radical in terms of every kind of politics. Like it's things that I listened to it and it brought a tear to my eye, because it was just exactly like everything acknowledged about the power dynamics and about, taking a sort of critical lens to veganism that you want to hear in vegan spaces and often you don't. And I know that my colleagues at the sanctuary also felt the same as I did. But unfortunately, Carol's talk was probably the least well received that year, because I was in charge of organising the responses to like the survey at the end, where they rate the different speakers, all the guests do, and they say how they enjoyed it and what they didn't enjoy, what could change. And people were either they loved her talk or they really, really didn't like it. And they were like, this is not the place for politics. This is not the place. I know your face. I'm like, okay. This is not the place to discuss these things. Because there was also a lot of discussion of race issues. And they were just like, oh, can we just leave that out of it? Can we just focus on the veganism? As though it's completely separate. As you said before, it's just completely depoliticizing it. And I think, I imagine her acknowledging the stolen land at the very start of her speech would have just got some people off on the wrong foot to start with, because they don't want to hear that. They're not there for that. They're there for a fun weekend. They're there to hear about, how to have a 6-pack and be vegan. Yeah. They're not, and see the animals and spend time with the animals, but not really question fundamentally like the politics of everything that's happening. And so that was quite disappointing, because her talk was incredible and was the best talk of the weekend in my opinion. But it comes back to the fact that it is it's a big charity now. They've got like a massive budget that keeps on growing, and they do that through having a lot of very wealthy donors. And a lot of very wealthy donors are, white Americans who are Republican or, conservative Democrats, and they just don't want to hear about what's, the sort of political underpinnings of veganism, which is a shame.
Yeah, that is a shame. I feel like that stuff like that kind of could be demoralizing. But is it like that a lot in the US with like there's just little recognition? I feel like it's something that would make a lot of people really uncomfortable.
Yeah, I mean, I think it definitely does. I think the fact that the sanctuary itself, I've not checked their website recently, but in my time there, the organisation didn't acknowledge that they were on stolen land. You know, that was an external speaker that came in and did that. And yeah, I think there's definitely a lack of that in general in the US, unless you're in sort of like, you know, like more anarchist spaces, or, you know, just people who are a bit more politically aware. Yeah, it's really, it's awful. Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like as well, there's a kind of large misconception with applying a decolonial lens to stuff like that, where they kind of think because they are on stolen land and acknowledging that and so on means that they have to leave or whatever. And it's like, no, you just have to participate in making sure that this isn't continuing with systems of domination, with systems of oppression. And that means for everybody, like, given the you're like, people in the US are probably, I obviously don't want to speak on behalf of the indigenous population at all. That's not what I'm trying to do, but they're probably welcome to stay as long as they're trying to build a society that's not based off of oppression in every form.
Yeah.
But I can see why that would make a lot of people uncomfortable, especially wealthy donors that have made their money and made their wealth through those systems of oppression.
Exactly. They're happy to question it if it's just a case of switching to like vegan fucking nuggets. That's the kind of oppression that they'll challenge. But if it requires them to really change or question how they've, you know, got the privilege that they have, and, you know, they've got to where they're able to pay, like, you know, the price of those tickets to the sanctuary weekend, like, they don't really want to hear that as much. I think about that.
Yeah. So back in Scotland, you spent some time working at the Glass Vegan in Glasgow. Did this time they do good food, by the way. They do good food. I can't deny that they do good food.
Oh no, I know, me neither. I know, it's great food.
Did this time develop your political beliefs at all?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so by and large, I would say I enjoyed my time at the Glasgow Vegan. It was a very stressful time for me, and that I was traveling a lot to get there, working really long hours, like, you know, like 10 to 12-hour shifts, you know, training new staff. After having only worked there for like less than a month, I was training new staff. I was opening and closing, had a lot of responsibility, and I was only getting paid like £5 an hour, because that's what they could pay me at that point, because I was 21.
Really?
Yeah. Oh no, sorry, I was 20. I wasn't 21 yet. I was 20 when I started. Yeah, I was getting paid £5 an hour. There were days when I would go to work and I would lose money because of how much it cost me to get there, because I was traveling in from Ayrshire. But I was like, oh, it's amazing though. It's like, you know, when you start up vegan cafe and the staff are lovely. Like, you know, the people who work there, almost everyone that I've worked with has been like one of the loveliest people I've ever met. And I'm still, you know, pretty good friends with most of the people that I've worked with there. But in terms of politically, it made me question again the sort of application of the vegan label and the association of that with it, you know, something is good if it's vegan, something is ethical if it's vegan. And actually, like, over time working there, I realized this is not a very ethical workplace. You know, after I left and looked back, I got some perspective and I was like, that was actually really awful that I was like working for that little amount of money. When if I had been a few years older, they would have paid me, you know, they would have paid me the same as everyone else. But I was actually training people who were getting paid a lot more than me. And not just that, but there was like a lot of like sort of responsibility that was placed on the staff that I think shouldn't have been. There was like fraudulent activity honestly going on that the management tried to put onto the staff, and there was like, you know, trying to avoid tax in different ways, and that all ended up actually having a really big impact on certain people who were employed from abroad and from the EU, because once lockdown happened and the furlough scheme was announced, some people weren't on payroll and they couldn't get furlough. and they had to actually leave the country because
Wow.
they've been, so there's like a lot of stuff that was, I'm going a bit of a rant, but there was a lot of things that were questionable, I think is my point about the business side of it. That even though in the idea of having a nice little zero waste vegan cafe, that's great, but you can have that and you can still have a lot of like insidious things going on behind the scenes that you don't know about. And I think for me that was a bit of a wake-up call. That was before I went to Farm Sanctuary and just after I worked with Amnesty, and this whole year was kind of realizing like, okay, all these great things that are on the surface fantastic, there's a lot going on behind the scenes that you don't know about. And there's a lot that needs to be challenged. Like being vegan is not enough. It was just like reinforcing that idea, I think, is that you need wider systemic change to really have an impact.
Yeah, it just goes back to the kind of, it's definitely, I want to say it's an overused phrase, but it's not, because it's not widely accepted, but there is just no ethical consumption under capitalism. Like it harks back to that point where you're talking about how going vegan, that's cool, but if it's depoliticizing, you're going to McDonald's for a McPlant burger, what are you actually changing? Like you're not changing the structure of how food is produced or anything like that. It's still like mass industrial production of food and all of the exploitation that comes with that.
Exactly. And I think we're definitely told, like, you pay with your dollar. I think rather than pound, I always hear dollar more than pound. You pay with your dollar, you pay with your pound, and that's how you vote. That's how you voice what's important to you. That's how you show your political will. And it's just not true. It's just, I mean, to some extent it is, if you're endorsing really terrible things, like if you're going to invest in the oil industry, that is different than buying a burger from the Glasgow Vegan. I know, but it's also just, it's not enough. Like you can't substitute actual political action with consumption because it's not the same. It's just not the same.
Yeah, it doesn't really change any of the systemic issues that kind of give rise to what's happening. But yeah, it just kind of show. I think that what you're talking about with the Glasgow Vegan is just something that's kind of industry wide just now in Glasgow. Like I've got a lot of friends who are part of Unite Hospitality Glasgow, and they've all like unionised in their workplaces because of how shocking and exploitative the hospitality industry has been, especially over lockdown. But even before lockdown, it was just like they're not the best places to work. But I understand what you're saying as well when you're losing money, because I think I worked in a pub when I was like 18. So I think I was earning like £4 or something an hour. And I was starting at 11 at night and finishing at 4. So I was like,
those are unsociable hours as well.
Oh, they're so unsociable hours. Like I was finishing at 4, and obviously how are you supposed to get home at 4 in the morning from town? You need to get a taxi. And I've worked like 5 hours and earned £4. So I'm breaking even, getting a taxi up the road, like I'm working for free.
Yeah, exactly. And that's also, I think, to do with the pressure that we feel that we are under to have a job, no matter whether you make money from it or not. You need to have a job, or there's something like immoral about that almost, I think, in our society. That's how it's presented. Like if you sign on and go to the job centre, my sister gone for some advice a few years ago, and we live really rural, so it's really hard to like get anywhere that's slightly further away from where we live and work there and earn money, because you're losing money just by going. So she'd been offered a job and they were just like, oh, you should just have taken that job. She's like, no, I would have been losing like money every single day just by going there. And they were like, yeah, but you just need to take it. You just need to work.
You just need to get off our books.
Yes, exactly. And I think hospitality, like you say, hospitality is especially exploitative, at least in Glasgow, probably elsewhere, but they use students a lot of the time as well. And I think students are too keen to be like, it's not that it's their fault, but like having been a student and being in this position, I was always too keen to be like, yeah, I'll cover a shift, yeah, of course, like I'll be here, I'll be totally flexible. And you just sort of, you're in the position where you can be a bit more flexible. And the second that you start to like enforce your boundaries, which I tried to do at the Glasgow Vegan, it just did not go down well. It didn't.
What just like negatively impacted the dynamic you had with?
Yeah, it was just kind of like maybe like, okay, well, this is what I can do because I've got another job. I'm working 2 jobs and I'm studying full time, so I could do this. And there was just like, it was just a bit of an atmosphere, I think, because I wouldn't cover shifts at the last minute for people because I was like, I physically cannot. Like, I've already worked like 50 hours this week. I can't work anymore. And it was just like, oh, we're all in it together and we need to look out for other people. And it's like, yeah, but there's no there's no room for me in this. There's no room for me to rest or for that to be a consideration. Yeah.
So you're saying you kind of realized this stuff when you were looking back rather than in the moment.
Yes.
Did the staff ever like consider unionizing or anything like that?
You know, I don't think we did. I don't think it was really a conversation. I think, you know, between ourselves, we would have conversations. We would say, oh, this is outrageous and this is ridiculous and this is wrong and this needs to change. But I don't think we actually considered joining a union, which looking back, I'm like, I really wish we had. Yeah. And I really wish, like, I hope the staff, you know, in all hospitality businesses do join unions and do advocate for their rights, because as you say, especially over lockdown, they have been treated just horrendously. It's just been awful. And I wish I'd been part of a union, because I would have gone to them and I would have known more of what to do and how to handle all these really difficult situations that you just shouldn't be faced with in the workplace that I was presented with. And yeah, it was hard. And I think having a union rep would have made it a lot easier, or at least it would have given more guidance and more structure and context to what was going on.
Yeah, I think everyone reflecting on workplace issues wishes that they had a union, which is probably why the Tories and people in power are so keen to suppress them, is because they actually get results.
Exactly, they do. They still have an impact. I think people think, you know, they completely squash them and it's over with, but it's like, no, they actually can still have an impact. It's just that I think we're, at least for me in that situation, I'm like, it wasn't even on my radar to join a union, because at some point, part of my brain, even though I knew some things were wrong, I was still like, oh, thank God I've got a job. Oh, thank God, I'm so lucky to be here. And you don't really want to rock the boat because you don't want to end up with a job that seems like that would be awful.
Yeah.
Even though it shouldn't be the worst thing in the world.
That it definitely shouldn't. And I think as well, like, it's hard to kind of push past that boundary where you're kind of realizing that actually this place only exists because of everyone who's working here.
Yeah.
Like, and we're getting such a short end of the stick. You're getting £5 an hour.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And that's probably the price of one of the menu items in the Glass Vegan. That's like a burger.
Oh, a burger's more expensive than me, honestly.
Yeah, like
than I was at that time. I know.
So then you've got someone who's actually not doing the work, who's not doing these 12-hour shifts, that's just taking the profits for, and for what? Exactly.
And honestly, like, there was just, because I went back to work there, that's what I'm saying, there's still definitely been like a mental block in my mind of like acknowledging, I don't know if it is that I wasn't acknowledging how bad it was back then. I think it was, I still, like last year I was like, I need a job, so I'll go back to the Glasgow Vegan. You know, it didn't end on bad terms the first time. It was just that looking back, I was like, well, that wasn't quite right. That wasn't quite, it's a bit dodgy. And yeah, I went back last year, and when I handed in my resignation, it was like with, it ended on bad terms. Let's put it that way, because there was a point where every staff member, there were only 3 of us, plus the manager who didn't put in as many hours as we did. There were only 3 staff members, and we were all off sick for different reasons. And should not have been in work, should not have been trying to run a whole cafe by ourselves. And the manager was putting such pressure on all of us and really like guilt tripping. She wouldn't close the business for literally like 1 day. She would not lose out on her money for the sake of everyone else's health. And at that point I was like, no, I'm done. Like, you know, my hours were getting, I was being she was trying to make me work more than my contracted hours, and I was just like, no, this is too much now. I'm done. I'm now willing to live on bad terms because this is too far. And I could see it impact on my colleagues' health, and they were feeling terrible and guilty. And I was like, this is just mad. This has to end.
Yeah. And if anyone is going through a similar situation, absolutely unionize as soon as you can.
Unionize, because they can't make you work more than your contracted hours. Really, they can't. The second that you go to a union, they'll be on top of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, they're genuinely gems of society. I mean, it's horrible to have to exist within this capitalist structure, and they just make it a bit easier.
Yep, they give you that wee bit of power back.
Yeah.
With collective power as well, which is the best part.
Yeah, and which will like snowball and inspire you to get into other things. Like, it's just the same method of sticking together that's always made an impact in the world.
Exactly, because I think otherwise you do just feel too isolated, especially when hard things are happening and you feel like, it's all on you. If you have a union there, at least there's literally all these other people there to help and that are going through the same thing.
Yeah, and they're literally there just through the goodness of their heart. Like, they just want to help you. They just want to stop the injustice that you're facing. Yeah, it's wild. So
and they acknowledge that it's injustice, which is important. So they acknowledge that it's injustice as well, which the hospitality industry does not. So that's important, the validation.
Like, I mean, we see that in the media just now. It's like all about getting hospitality back open and defending the hospitality industry and stuff, but no one's defending the people that actually prop up the hospitality industry and are responsible. They're saying like, oh, we're losing all this money being closed, but it's like, you wouldn't make that money if it wasn't for the people that you treat so horribly.
100%. Like you say, they frame it as the industry, and it's like, who's the industry? Who? It's the people who work in it. So let's talk about them. Let's talk about what they go through.
Absolutely. So we met through working as fundraisers for Amnesty International.
Yes.
What inspired you to join Amnesty?
So when I applied for the job at Amnesty, I had just came back from teaching English in Vietnam. And I think I felt very guilty about a lot of that, because talking about post-colonial attitudes, and there was a lot of like racism in the workplace there. I was getting paid so many times more than what my Vietnamese colleagues were getting paid, and they were more qualified than me. I didn't even have a degree at that point. And when I came back, I tried to volunteer when I was there and stuff, but at the end I was just like, no, I'm papering over cracks. Like, this is just, I'm not okay with this situation. I'm getting special privilege because I'm white, and that's just like, no. So yeah, I think when I came back, I was like, I want to do something that's more aligned with my interests and my beliefs. And I saw the job at Amnesty, and I was like, you know what? Human rights, that's really important to me. So I'm going to go ahead and apply to work at Amnesty. It's just, I mean, everyone knows Amnesty, like you grow up and you know that they do really good work, and you learn about some of their work in school. And it was familiar, and it was something that I believed in. So that's what motivated me to join.
Yeah. I kind of feel that for me, joining Amnesty, or just like being a fundraiser in general, it always just felt like a compromise I was making with myself. I was like, I need to exist within this capitalist structure. Like, I have to get a job to support myself. What's the job that I can do that's kind of like the least harm? And just like working for NGOs did come across like that.
Yeah.
But I'm not really sure that I feel like they cause the least harm anymore to a lot of things. But it is better than working for an insurance company or something like that.
Or Shell Oil or KPMG.
Yeah. Like, a lot of good does come out of it, but ultimately, like, charity isn't a replacement for like changing the system.
And civil society, I think.
Yeah.
I think it's increasingly seen as an alternative to civil society and community, and it's not the same.
Yeah, it's not in the slightest. Could you tell us about the Loft Books?
Yes, the Loft Books were one of the highlights of my time at Amnesty. It was a concept that our manager came up with, and it was just, I think it was every day that we did it, wasn't it? Or maybe it
No, it was.
wasn't supposed to be.
Was it like every Monday and Wednesday?
Yeah, I think it wasn't supposed to be every day, but I think eventually, like if we had a hard day, we'd be like, get the Love Books.
Yeah, which was almost every day.
Almost every day, exactly. And I was reading through mine just before we called here, and yeah, it was just a way of letting each other know how much we appreciated each other. You know, we were quite a close wee team, and it was just the loveliest way of like taking a minute, pausing. You know, you might be in the middle of a really hard day or a really nice day, and just to let your co-workers know like why you love them and little parts of their personality that are like special to you and how they impact on you. And yeah, it was just so sweet, so sweet. I think this was you? I struggled. You and Maria had very similar handwriting.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because like sometimes I'm like, oh, that's Harry. Then I'm like, oh, is that Maria?
That actually makes sense, because I was like, I can barely read what Maria says, and I can barely read my own handwriting. So
well, I can read them both fine, but they are very similar.
yeah,
Yeah, but like for instance, I think this was you, but it could be Maria. You had said like, I love how you harness your compassionate vegan vibes and turn it into lasting change for humans. I think that was you, because I don't think Maria would have said vibes. There are certain things where I'm like, that was Harry. The word legend was in there, that was Harry. But yeah, they were just like the loveliest wee things to have during the day. And if you were having a hard time on the street, you could just like take it out of your pocket and have a wee look and be like, okay, people love me. It's okay. Someone just shouted at me and told me I was scum, because people around me really care about me and appreciate me, and you know that I'm trying to do good here. So
yeah. I think it was like it's a really good example of like solidarity as well.
Yeah.
It was like just kind of horizontal, like we're all in this together.
Yeah.
I think like if you're going through something horrible, you can read these words of affirmation and know that there's people in the world that are going through what you're going through. Mm-hmm. And we just support you. We've got your back. I think it's definitely one of my favourite things about any workplace that I've ever worked in.
I know. I think every workplace should have Love Books.
Yeah.
I think make every workplace give it a much nicer environment, because I think it really also bonded us as well. I think like we were all close anyway, but I think having the wee Love Books just helped us to feel a bit closer to each other, because you're reading these words that people are writing about you, and it's not really things that you would necessarily say, you know, sitting on the train heading to Edinburgh having a cup of coffee, but it's nice to know that people do appreciate like the sort of the deeper aspects of your beliefs and your actions as well.
Yeah, I mean, people don't really get a look into how they impact other people's lives.
Mm-hmm.
So like just sitting reading through that, you're like, oh no way, someone actually appreciates that about me. I didn't even know that anyone noticed that.
Exactly, and it's such a nice thing to keep. Like, do you still have yours?
Yeah.
I think it's one of those things I'll keep forever.
I never used it for its intended use though. Like, I never once read it on the street. I think I read it like after I left Amnesty, and I was almost crying. I was like, oh my god, I wish I read this so much sooner. But
I can't believe you had the willpower not to read it, honestly.
I know.
Every time I get it back, I'd be like,
what's new?
What else did you but yeah, it's just such a lovely way, I think, to connect with people, and everyone should do it. Not just workplaces, friend groups, families, everyone should have a wee Love Book, because it's just such a lovely way to communicate with people.
Yeah, it's important for people to know they're appreciated.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
Yeah. So what I didn't realise before joining Amnesty was like how frequently Christian fundamentalists would come up and talk to you about abortion rights and so on. I think for me it was more people would come up and talk about Palestine.
Yeah.
Because that was actually one of the reasons that I chose Amnesty over other NGOs was because, like, yeah, they're actually sound on Palestine.
Yeah.
They recognise Palestine's right to exist.
Yeah.
Which is shocking that it's like one of the only organisations to do that. But yeah, I would have like more guys would come up to me and talk about that than abortion rights, but I still did have freaks like that. Was that something that you experienced a lot?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think I definitely did. I am shockingly bad now at recalling specific conversations from the street. I know that happened. I think for me, like when people would approach me and talk about, I think I was good at handling like sort of Christian fundamentalists because my family raised me Catholic, and so like when I was sort of learning more about politics and rights and everything, that's what I was coming up against every day, in school, at home. That's what defined a lot of my life from the start. So I think I was quite comfortable handling those sorts of conversations. Like if people wanted to come up and have a discussion or challenge me, I'd be able to, you know, understand their logic and where they're coming from, but also be able to be like, well, this is why that's not quite right, or not right at all. I think it probably did happen more to the women on the team than the men in terms of like abortion rights. I think what was more dismaying for me was not just, it was just the apathy, I think, from a lot of people towards women's rights. I think it was like bringing it up and just seeing their eyes glaze over and hearing them explicitly say like, no, like women literally have enough rights, like let's just leave it there. Like at least if someone's coming to you and being like, oh, I think abortion is wrong, you can be like, no, this is why. Whereas when people are just saying, I just don't think, you know, I think women have gone far enough. That's you know, I've still got plenty of good reasons why that's not true, but it's more disheartening, I think, to come up against that. But yeah, I think as well for me it was more the ones that stuck with me in terms of those kind of conversations about women's rights. It was more from within the team. We had someone in our team that was pretty hostile towards women's rights, and it was hard to know that you were working alongside someone talking about human rights every day, but they would think that you making choices about your own body was wrong and not your place to do so. And I think as well, knowing that they objectified women and including yourself at certain times. And, you know, for me, that was harder. It was harder to work alongside people that you knew viewed you like that day in and day out than it was to have a 5-minute conversation with someone about it on the street. And yeah, I think that wasn't handled well by management. It wasn't, because the people who, it's kind of like typical what people know about fundraising when they call people chuggers, like charity muggers. I think that probably comes from part of the sleaze aspect of it, where you do get people who can be sleazy and can, you know, try to make people feel uncomfortable, and that's why they end up donating money. It's not because they really care about the cause, it's because they feel so uncomfortable and they want to get away and they want this interaction to end. And I think working alongside someone like that, it makes you question what is going on here. Like, how can I be working for human rights and this is what's happening on the street? I'm seeing women be harassed, I'm seeing women feel uncomfortable, and I know that if that was me, I know that that is me half the time with this person, but it's hard to see that, I think, within the workplace, within the organization, because external to that, you know, society is a mixed bag. You know, you have people who don't support the rights of all different people, and you know that you're going to come up against that. Don't get me wrong, some of it is a lot more hostile than others, and it's not okay. But it's harder within the workplace where you think that your values are aligned and they're not.
Yeah. That is, so you feel like management completely let you down in that?
No. Oh, I thought you said you let me down.
No, I'm saying no, management. No.
What are you on about? I'm not talking about
I never
you.
even knew there was a member of the team that was like that.
There was someone that said the fact that me and Maria didn't want to have children was selfish. The fact that we don't want to give birth, that's selfish, because your body can produce babies, so you should be producing babies.
that worked on the team.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's the thing. I think it was one of those things that even, you know, you don't want to cause unnecessary friction on the team. It was something that was kind of known amongst, like, definitely me and Maria would speak about it and have conversations, but it was kind of not something that we would just offer up because you wouldn't really want people to feel uncomfortable.
Yeah. Actually, I think it's coming back to me now. I think I do know who you're talking about.
I think you probably do.
Yeah. I just realised that there.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, it's something that is definitely universal across all of fundraising.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Having worked for other organisations, like, you see it all the time, but I'd never experienced it with people within the organisation until Amnesty. But I know, like, at other organisations, because of certain scandals and so on that came out about those organisations, they were very on point about trying to defend fundraisers and their experiences, but yeah, so, not enough is done whatsoever.
No, because I think it still comes to their bottom line at the end of the day. It's okay, this person might be sleazy, but does he get a lot of sign-ups?
Yeah.
Because otherwise we're not going to do anything about it. And even, I mean, I think the workplace that the other organization that you worked for, they had they were clear that that wasn't acceptable, and they, even if someone did have sign-ups, they wouldn't allow that. But I think they also had their limits with, like, okay, this could help to keep people safe, but can we afford it? No. And it's like, if you're a charity that can't afford to keep your staff safe, then what are you doing? Like, why are you putting them out there in that precarious environment and you can't keep them safe?
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, something does tell me you wrote an entire dissertation about this.
16,000 words.
Tell us a bit about it and, like, your conclusions and so on.
Yeah. So I guess my time at Amnesty really made a mark that 4 years later, I had to go on a 16,000 word rant about it, just to get it out of my system. But yeah, no, I decided to, I think I did my master's in human rights and international politics. And again, of course, like, Amnesty comes up a lot. When you're talking about human rights, it's mentioned a lot, and sometimes it is with a critical perspective, but never are fundraisers mentioned, never the face-to-face fundraisers mentioned, not just for Amnesty, but for any organization. There's no research out there that I could find that looked at face-to-face public fundraisers like what we did and considers how that's related to the intensely bureaucratic structures of these organizations. And so I was like, do you know what, like, that needs to be addressed. Like, we need to have some sort of idea of what's happening on the streets and how is this related to the NGO, because they escape responsibility by the fact that they outsource our recruitment. So we're not officially hired by Amnesty, or if it's Save the Children or like Shelter, like, you're hired through an agency. And so if you have issues, and if you were to unionize and wanted to do something about it, it wouldn't be the charity that would get pulled up, it would be the agency. And you see this time and time again where, like, in the news, it's like, oh, such and such an agency has been taken to court over this issue, and the charity just switches agency, they just go to a different one. So there's a lot of issues in terms of how they outsource that recruitment and why. What is it that they're trying to avoid responsibility for, that they do this? Because most operations are in-house, except for fundraising. So it just seemed like a really nice wee gap to look into, and I spoke to a lot of lovely people who have had the job over the years, and they shared their experiences of it, and so much of it was so familiar to me, and just so many people had the same experiences. And it's a case of women especially, are harassed day in, day out. A lot of the time they're assaulted. in a lot of instances, there's not proper processes to go through to give them the support that they need after this sort of thing happens. And that's in terms of assault. When it comes to harassment, nothing is ever done, because if you were to go to management every time someone was harassed on the street, like you would never be on the street. And there's just a lot of abuse by managers as well. A lot of pressure and a lot of deliberate impersonalization, I would say, of the individuals that work in this area, of making them, you're just like a fundraising machine. Your job is to get money. Your job isn't to consider that you've had a really hard day and, people have shouted at you and called you all sorts. You need to be resilient. And it's like the way that resilience is weaponized is really, really insidious. Like that came up a lot in the conversations I had with people, that, you're a fundraiser, you're resilient, get over it. And they were very, I'm trying to think, were there any women I spoke to that hadn't had a moment where they'd cried on the street? I don't know. If so, very few. You would reach your breaking point. Everyone had their breaking point, and women were pushed there much faster than men. And again, like you've got charities that are going, why do we have such a gender imbalance in senior fundraising roles? It's like, look at the entry positions, look at where you're starting from. You can't have a representative bureaucracy if you treat the people at the bottom like they're nothing, like they're not even part of the organization. So this is a very big, long-winded tangent. But it was great. It was such a good opportunity to hear about other people's experiences, and hopefully I'm hoping to do something with that, because I don't think submitting it to turn it in to check for plagiarism and having one person read it is quite the same as actually trying to instigate change. But yeah.
So your dissertation also focused heavily on like the corporate structure of NGOs. How does this corporate structure affect their work, do you think, in terms of like fundraising and the actual work that they do?
So it affects everything. The corporate structure, I'm trying to think of a way to summarize it neatly, because I've ranted so much, but in terms of fundraising, it puts pressure on the individuals working in face-to-face fundraising to hit their targets for each day. It leads them to prioritize targets over their own well-being and safety, and it seemingly justifies the organization doing the same, which obviously it doesn't justify it, but in their minds it does. More generally, it serves to de-radicalize a lot of organizations that started off with really great ideas and really great intentions, but the bigger that they get, the more corporate sponsors they get, the more bureaucratized their organizations and hierarchical, the less control they actually have in terms of achieving the things that they want to achieve. Because if you've got some major donors, so this is where this is separate from face-to-face, because face-to-face is like you're out on the street chatting to everyday people, the normal members of the public. Whereas when it's more senior fundraising roles within the organization, they deal with major donors. And when you've got major donors who are given, tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of pounds every year to your organization, those people expect to see something for that money, and they expect to see something that they want to see. And that fundamentally changes an organization's ability to pursue its own goals. And it also means that they're more likely to pursue short-term goals, because they want feedback. They want to be able to quantify what they've done. They want to be able to say, we've fed this many children, rather than, we have, came up against this whole political regime and no, nothing's changed yet, but we're getting there. Like that doesn't feed back well to donors. They want to see something for their money, or they're going to go elsewhere. So that also then creates a sort of competitive environment within the NGO industry, so to speak. And it's a really vicious cycle, I think.
Excellent answer. Yeah, just talking again about the corporate structure. I
Mhm.
think it's like something that's so overlooked within
Mhm.
like the conversation about NGOs and charities and stuff like that. It was something that I already believed when I became a fundraiser. Like I said, I
Mhm.
only took that job as a compromise. Like
Yeah.
I'm just here to make money, and like I know that ethical consumption under capitalism doesn't exist, but this is
Mhm.
like the least unethical way that I can possibly do that.
Yeah.
And yeah, I remember when I was fundraising, I would always meet this guy on Byers Road, and he would be like, he was always pushing a pram, and he'd be like, "Nah, mate, I'm not signing up like before you even start because I just don't agree with the corporate structures of charities." And I just didn't. Like your automatic response is right. You need to try and objection handle this guy into like trying to
Mhm.
sign him up for the organization. I was just like, I can't.
Yeah.
Like I agree. Like I fundamentally agree with this guy.
Yeah.
Like how are you supposed to try and convert him in any way?
Yeah.
Uh,
You're like
just
arguing against your own beliefs.
yeah, which is a
Mhm.
good exercise to do within debating, but
Mhm.
at the same time, like
Mhm.
I just didn't have it in me. Like
No.
agreed, agreed, and it just became a kind of like it always just played in my mind so much when I was working for those organizations, and I was like, I got to the point where I was like, I just don't want to compromise it on my beliefs anymore.
No.
Like, I,
No.
I just don't want to compromise. So I think it was the climate strike
Mm.
of 2019 that kind of
Mhm.
pushed me over the edge
Mhm.
because I was working for Oxfam at the time, and we were all on climate strike, and we were making like banners that said system change, not climate change, and stuff like that,
Mhm.
which was good. That's exactly what the kind of message that these organizations should be promoting.
Yeah.
But then after that, in the pandemic hit, that was in like November 2019.
Mhm.
And then I went to like Argentina and Uruguay for a month
Mhm.
and then came back. And then it was a pandemic. So we didn't really work after that. And I was just like thinking about it so much. And I was like, it's the same thing for poverty. Oxfam set up to end world poverty. And to do that, you're going to have to be like, we need system change.
Mhm.
And they just weren't doing that for poverty. And I was like, I don't know. I actually want to pursue ending poverty. And that does mean ending capitalism and
Yeah.
promoting systems that are just out with the systems of domination that we already exist under. So I did appreciate that your dissertation went on to focus on the corporate structure of charities because I don't really know. I've not really looked into how much stuff there is about that kind of books and anything like that. But if you do have any good books about that, then please do recommend.
I shall send them your way. I would say that the theory to look into is NGO-ization,
Mhm.
because it's all about the sort of the move towards a hierarchical bureaucratic structure and the depoliticization of social movements and how NGOs actually facilitate that. And so as much as they can do good in certain ways, actually are they taking away our ability or our will and our motivation to come together and have a long lasting successful social movement because we think they're taking care of it, it's okay.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
there's
that,
something
it's definitely something that I relate with. Like, so sorry, that word's in the title of your dissertation, isn't it?
NGO-ization.
Yeah,
Yeah,
NGO-ization.
always comes up with a typo though. It's a term, it's not a word.
Yeah, okay, okay.
Mhm.
Are you okay if I put your dissertation in the description or something for people to read so that they have a reference point?
Oh, I wouldn't mind that, but I'll need to get back to you on that and check with my ethical approval and the what I'm actually allowed to do with it. I
Okay.
might not be able to do that because it depends on what I've had the participants agree to, and I'm pretty sure it might be limited to, I think I would need to get participants' consent.
Approval.
But I can do that. I can definitely get in touch with them and just check.
Yeah, no, let me know, because let me read out the full title again. Exploring the gendered impacts of NGO-ization on public face-to-face fundraisers. Understanding hierarchisation. That's a hard word to say, by the way. Impersonality and institutional survival. I did read it, and it was like a really interesting piece. And just in case anyone listening wanted to read it, I did want to have an avenue for them to be able to do that.
Yeah, no, that would be ideal. I'll look into it and I'll let you know. And thank you for reading it. That's not an easy, not a light read. It's not an easy one. I don't even know if I did fully read it before I submitted it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I didn't fully read my undergrad dissertation, but yeah, it's kind of, I think since I did work for like Amnesty and Farm Sanctuary and stuff, that's the sort of idea of how charities' values are undermined by their corporate structures and their, how they get their funding. That's been something that's just been on my mind ever since I wrote my undergrad dissertation on something similar, because it's just such an interesting area, and I think it's so important to try and understand what's going on and how can we still have really strong social movements that achieve change.
Yeah, no, I agree. Like, you just don't want to kind of see people fall into that whole charity aspect when, like, so all the people I know that work for charities are amazing people, and they're doing it out of the goodness of their heart and so on. And I just kind of wish that it wasn't like that in a way. I was like, I wish I could just take you and place you within a social movement, a campaign group, anything, and just watch you flourish on that, because it would just be 10 times better for the world. You're not participating in these structures that they're not challenging anything, really.
No, it's like you say, it's a compromise. And like, I'm sure those, like, the people that would probably rather be part of a social movement and, work in a campaign full time and still be able to pay their bills. But it's like, okay, if we need to get jobs under this, neoliberal regime, then might as well be in something that's trying to do good and, has good intentions and it's like minimizes harm to some extent, but
yeah,
it's all compromise.
Yeah, well, it's like,
should fund campaigns. That's what campaigns should, have jobs with them that people can actually do instead of joining NGOs again.
Yeah, a lot do. I think that also presents problems though, because then it's like, how much are you going to work towards, like, say it was an anti-fracking job and your job is to ban fracking and you do it. Like, how much is it in your interest to do that if it means that you're going to be out of a job? People didn't understand that when I was saying that to people as part of a charity. I was like, listen, I don't want to be here. I don't want this to be my job. I want my job to be obsolete within the next few years.
Yeah.
But I think, lockdown and just thinking about it, I was like, I can't make that compromise anymore, knowing that my job is always going to continue as long as these organizations participate with corporate structures and are beholden to these corporate organizations and fundamentally aren't challenging capitalism and the state's power at all.
God, it's so hard. It's so hard.
I know. We'll get there though. I have faith that
you full time on it. I think so.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think that pretty much wraps up everything that I wanted to ask you. So thank you so much for talking to me today and answering my personal questions. Very invasive.
Yeah, no, I feel. Yeah. No, it's all my favourite subject. Everything I love to talk about. Feel free to cut out as many rambling, I love sheep rants that are in here.
The ramblings are what I want. That's where the true personality comes out. Sometimes I'll just sit and let you talk.
I know, I was kind of like, oh, poor Harry sitting here.
No, that's what I want. This isn't about me talking, it's about you talking.
Well, I very much enjoyed it. It's been lovely.
Excellent.